Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about 2023. How does one describe the entertainment industry in 2023?
It was a shit show.
Okay, that's a bit harsh. But if you're tuned in enough to the world of entertainment, there were probably more controversial headlines and poor decisions made by the higher-ups than there have been ever since I started doing these lists. If the people who work night and day on the entertainment we love weren't worried their projects would be cancelled to make studio earnings look 2% better, or spending their summer on strike fighting for living wages or decent working conditions, they were worried about those jobs being replaced by the increasing presence of AI. And this was also the centennial year of two of the biggest studios in the world. Great job, guys. Way to celebrate the art form that made you billions of dollars. But that's all bigwig stuff. Luckily, those people who craft wonderful stories were still working hard, and are now getting compensated a bit better for it, to create some truly memorable entertainment this year. That's why I'm once again counting down my top 12 favorite pieces of entertainment from 2023. Quick reminder of how these lists work. The only thing the entertainment in question has to do to qualify for the list is to be released in 2023. Movies, new TV shows, or new seasons of shows that started in previous years are all fair game. And of course, that these are just my picks. My list is definitely going to vary very much from yours, but these are the things I like the most throughout the year and want to celebrate before we tackle the new year. Keeping the intro short this time, I really want to get to the list. Let's count down my top 12 favorite pieces of entertainment of 2023. Why top 12? Because with this much great stuff out there, you really expect me to only pick 10? Let's start off with number 12. Tetris. This movie is nuts. Remember when they announced that a Tetris movie was in the works a few years back? Around the same time Pixels and the Emoji Movie happened, and everyone was rolling their eyes at how they'd make a movie out of anything in a post-Lego movie world. I freely admit that what we got was the last thing I expected, and it's great. Did you know that the origins of porting Tetris to the Game Boy involved battling human rights restrictions placed on people by the KGB in communist Russia? I sure didn't. It is a shockingly suspenseful story that just keeps getting more dangerous as the story progresses. And again, I cannot believe I'm saying this about the story of Tetris. I'm sure there are some details fudged or changed like there is in every based on a true story film, but the fact that this is even remotely something that happened is absolutely mesmerizing to me and made me all the more captivated. It's the same way I felt towards something like Catch Me If You Can. The story is unbelievably engaging, and the characters add that personal touch needed to make the stakes all the higher. With Taron Egerton and, oh god, I'm so sorry, Nikita Yefremov as the designer and innovator later turned friends at the heart of it all. Plus it's got this really neat pixel art they use for the transitions. It's so cool. Not to put too fine a point on it, but Tetris is just a wild ride of a movie, and a pretty appropriate one for 2023, considering the main plot of the movie is about someone creative and passionate being denied the credit and compensation they deserve. But there's also a lesson here perhaps about not judging projects right away. Movies and shows get announced all the time with few details, and it's easy to make assumptions or draw conclusions, but you never know what it's going to be until it makes it to screens. And Tetris was one of the biggest surprises for me this year, which earns it the first spot on this list. Number 11. My Adventures with Superman. I don't tend to get super passionate about adaptations of Superman. He's just not a hero I ever really got into. You want to debate over which movie or show is the best or worst? Knock yourself out, but don't expect me to care. Which was the same attitude I had towards the new animated series, My Adventures with Superman. Despite hearing how good it was, I couldn't see myself getting into it. That was until I was in my hotel room during BroadwayCon in the middle of the night and stumbled across the newest episode. It didn't take long for the show to get me hooked, and once I got home, I caught up with the episodes that aired before and anticipated every new episode after. One of the things that's difficult when it comes to telling Superman stories is this argument that Superman isn't relatable. And on some level, I think that's true. Not because he's nice or even strong, but more because he's not particularly vulnerable. He's literally indestructible. This show, however, has a smart approach to the origins of Clark becoming Superman. He slowly discovers new powers and what he's truly capable of, but his lack of understanding those powers, why this is happening, or where he comes from, is where the conflict comes in. Clark is a good-natured guy who's worried about the world finding out that if he wanted to, he could level a city, which turns out to be a very justified fear. People get paranoid when he starts flying into action and just can't believe this powerful being would come out of nowhere and just want to rescue cats from trees. I absolutely adored this angle to tackling Superman's origins and discovering what Superman means to both Clark and the people around him. The supporting cast is pretty strong too. This version of Lois Lane is so enthusiastic yet no nonsense and won't be pushed around by anyone, even her super strong boyfriend. It's great. I think the way they updated Jimmy Olsen was pretty creative, and while I'm not too well versed in Superman's rogues gallery, this seemed like a pretty good group for the inaugural season. We're not ready for Lex Luthor yet. I'm sure there are some hardcore Superman fans out there who could pick apart certain choices they made or directions they took, and not everything here is going to work for everybody. Heck, there are some story choices I didn't care for, but I think the show does enough right to make it stand out among its fellow adaptations. The animation and character designs are incredibly appealing, no surprise coming from Studio Mir, the voice work is solid, the stories are exciting and emotional, and the whole thing just carries this aura that feels unquestionably like Superman. Looking up in the sky and seeing this impossible person who just wants to do good with the gifts he's been given, inspiring the best in others and watching them stand up for themselves and for him those few times he crashes back down to Earth. It's a fresh new take on a timeless hero, and it finally made me care about Superman. Number 10. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Season 5. Oh my goodness. Okay, I've never really brought this up before, but I love The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. The writing is sharp and hilarious. The production design and score can warp you back to the 1950s quicker than Marty McFly in the driver's seat, and the cast and characters are bursting with personality and charm, even when they are pig-headed and stubborn, which is, most of the time. I'd argue it was the show that really put Amazon Prime on the map as another home for quality original programming. So when I heard season 5 would be its final season, I was pretty worried. When such a big and important show that you really love gets ready to wrap up, expectations are pretty high to do it well, or at least not terribly. Thankfully, I think season 5 is one of the show's best, with the slow but certain growth in Midge's career and the usual roadblocks to keep things interesting. It is kind of tough for me to even pinpoint what works so well about it without just saying what works about the rest of the show. It portrays the difficulties our two leading ladies have breaking into show business at this point in time, while being incredibly funny at the same time. The only major difference is that this season jumps around in time quite a bit, getting some glimpses into the future of these characters. This was a bit of a divisive direction, but honestly, I think it really works. It shows that while success does come, there's always dysfunction and arguments and obstacles in the way. You just have to try your best to find yourself in the middle of the chaos, which is everything the show has been about since day one. The cast is absolutely electric, giving it 110% as they often do. Every episode is well written and entertaining, even when it gets kind of weird. There are some really insightful moments from time to time, and I don't think I could have asked for a better last episode. So many of those conclusive moments we all hope to see since the first episode are wonderfully brought to life here. Without saying exactly what happens, the final scene of Mrs. Maisel might just be one of my new favorite final scenes of a TV show. As a fan of the show since the beginning, the final season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel left me feeling really good. Not every decision the show made was great, there were some choices I will die mad about, but I'd say when all was said and done, it wound up being one of those shows that was consistently excellent all the way through. I'm sad to see it go, but I'm very grateful that it was here. Thank you, Mrs. Maisel, and good night.
Thank you and good night!
Number 9. Only Murs in the Building, Season 3. For the third year in a row, Only Murs in the Building makes the list. I just love this show that much. Last year it was relegated to the honorable mentions, but this time it's back on the list proper, because this was probably the show's most ambitious season yet. Alongside our already fabulous cast of characters, Season 3 has an unbelievably star-studded cast of newcomers. A lot of people got really excited to see Paul Rudd as our victim, and Meryl Streep was in it too. Some of you might have heard of her. Seriously though, Meryl Streep playing an actress who's struggled all her life to break into show business is hilarious on the most meta level. As As usual, the show itself takes full advantage of what it's got, its casting, its writing, and its setting, because this time we have a murder mystery taking place in the theater. This is easily the most entertaining aspect of season 3 for me as a hopeless theater nerd. It's a really good backdrop for a murder mystery. They did that thing where the story the play is telling is similar to the case they're solving, which I adore, and it comes with a lot of original songs, all of which sound great. Again, as a hopeless fan of Little Shop of Horrors, it was really cool to hear Steve Martin singing again. The mystery is also just as elaborate as ever, probably with more red herrings than ever before. It always keeps you guessing, but not in a way where it's super annoying. It is engaging, I promise. The show continues to follow along with our main trio, not just on murder-solving antics, but on their personal quest for happiness, taking new and interesting forms for each of them this season. They were all great, but as someone who also turned 30 this year, I couldn't help but relate to Mabel's conflicts as a late bloomer that, while seen by some as bright and capable, struggles to find a path to take advantage of that yet. Like everything else in the show, it's just really well done. Only Murders in the Building has done an exceptional job at showing that everyone has a story. You may be the main character of your own story, but everyone else isn't a supporting player. They all have lives and stories of their own. My personal favorite kind of murder mystery are the ones that not only explain what happened, but why. What decisions led to this outcome and how it connects to very personal, very human reactions. Every direction this particular mystery takes highlights this beautifully. Only Murders in the Building Season 3 is just as funny, elaborate, well executed, and emotional as the seasons before it. I will sing the show's praises any chance I get, and I hope we can continue this streak and see Season 4 on the list next year. Number 8. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Fans of superheroes and animation were eating well this year. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur definitely gave me spiderverse vibes, but it's more like if Spider-Verse had to be confined to a television screen, with smaller scale animation that they push where they can, and more low-stakes slice-of-life adventures. The premise of a young, bright girl deciding to become a superhero to help serve her community, with her newly acquired dinosaur by her side, is brimming with eccentricity and originality. It has a diverse cast of characters, every fight includes a rocking bit of musical accompaniment, and an art style that immediately makes the show stand out from Marvel's other animated projects. There's a lot to draw viewers into the adventures of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Moon Girl does dabble in a lot of familiar tropes, but very much has its own unique identity. The show has more than enough charm and well-written moments to make these episodic tropes entertaining all over again. Lunella is an amazing protagonist to follow along with these adventures, and the friendship she forms along the way, yes, even with the dinosaur, only makes her and her journey throughout this first season so much stronger. It's a kind of series that feels both fresh and nostalgic. It took me right back to watching shows like Powerpuff Girls or Kim Possible as a kid. I could easily see kids today begging for a pair of roller skates so they could recreate their favorite battles from the show or come up with ones of their own, literally placing themselves in Moon Girl's shoes. Every aspect of it feels like it's so well thought out, and there's a clear heart and intent present throughout the entire thing. There's also the fact that the show is like pseudo-canon to the MCU, so it comes with a lot of cool cameos in true Marvel fashion. It's probably the best thing the television side of Disney Animation has going for it now that the Owl House is over. It's such a well-made show with familiar stories, but new and much-needed perspectives on them. The finale broke my heart, and I cannot wait to see what kind of Moon Girl magic they deliver in Season 2. Number 7. Poker Face. You ever wonder what Columbo would be like if it starred Nikki from Orange is the New Black? Then have I got the series for you. I'm always on the lookout for the new quirky detective on the scene, so I was delighted to hear about this show. If you haven't heard of Poker Face, it follows Charlie Cale, played by Natasha Lyonne, who has a very special gift. She can always tell when people are lying. She's used this ability with the wrong people a few times, and it leaves her on the run for her life. What follows are vignettes of murders occurring across the country, with Charlie stumbling upon them and using her gifts to make things right before moving on. My Columbo comparison is pretty apt, because most of the time, we'll spend time with the victim or the murderer before Charlie drops in to solve things, which is a very similar structure to a typical episode of Columbo. This show definitely made me appreciate this framing that, as good as it is, I sometimes struggle with in Columbo. Not only are we, the audience, given time to really get to know these people, both before and after the crime, but Charlie forms all kinds of relationships with the people involved, making these mysteries much more personal and thus making the stakes higher. In fact, sometimes part of the mystery is figuring out how she'll even get involved. Charlie is a really unique main character for a mystery series. She doesn't go looking for these cases, she doesn't get a thrill out of solving complex mysteries, she wants to remain average and in the shadows, but she can't help how she sees the world, and if something seems off, she just has to do something about it. It offers a really unique experience following a lot of the typical tropes of this genre. Not to mention that, like any good murder mystery show, it has its fair share of high-profile guest stars. Ron Perlman's in one of them. Will that get you nerds to watch it? The mysteries are gripping, the ongoing story keeps tension high in the background, and makes you even more invested in Charlie's story. Natasha Lyonne plays this character exceptionally well. Everything about it was just really appealing to me. I struggle to recall an episode I didn't thoroughly enjoy. And I am so glad there's more on the way. It is literally the only reason I ever use Peacock. If you're looking for a fresh take on the murder mystery, this is definitely a show to track down. Number 6. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3. So, my one movie and one TV show rule still stands for the MCU, and it was a lot easier to stand by that this year. Don't worry, I'm not going to become one of those, the MCU is dead people, but it was definitely 50-50 this year. For every good story, there was one that was less than that. But sandwiched right between the poorly received Ant-Man Quantumania and the downright reviled Secret Invasion, there was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Leave it to the Guardians to shatter expectations once again. Oh, I think people expected this movie to be great, or were at least hoping it would be, but this movie was meaningful for a lot of reasons, and to still have it deliver a high-quality experience on top of that is commendable. I'll keep this one brief since I do intend to start catching up on To Infinity War and Beyond fairly soon, but one thing that is noticeable right away about Volume 3 is its much smaller scale, with the main premise of the story seeing the Guardians trying to save Rocket's life after he's fatally wounded. While there are still space battles, a planet-conquering villain, and lots of explosions, having the stakes be the life of just one character is an approach I have a lot of respect for. That personal touch makes what's already so great about this franchise the heart and soul of the story. I think it's fairly uncontroversial to say that Rocket is the most popular member of the team, and to have the final installment in the franchise revolve around his backstory and growth, it just feels so right. It handles a lot of the stuff that happened during the Infinity War really well, and it feels like a really strong conclusion to the team that leaves room for more stories, but if this is the last time we see any of them, I won't be mad. It's funny, weird, existential, and emotionally devastating as audiences everywhere cried over the fate of a CGI raccoon. Everything that makes Guardians of the Galaxy so wonderful. While I didn't mind Quantumania all that much, and I like the Marvels a lot, there's no question what the best MCU movie of 2023 was. With Guardians of the Galaxy 3, this unlikely franchise can now call itself one of the strongest trilogies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I couldn't have asked for a better send-off. Number 5. Doctor Who's 60th Anniversary. With Doctor Who having 3 specials to celebrate its 60th anniversary this year, I could have just put all 3 on here and left it at that. However, since they are all promoted as separate specials, like Jodie Whittaker's final episode last year, I decided that only one could make the favorites list. And it's Wild Blue Yonder. No contest. Out of all 3 of the anniversary specials, Wild Blue Yonder feels the least like it belongs in this Diamond celebration. There's no cameos or callbacks to the show's history, at least not until the end. The Doctor and Donna are isolated in one location. Superficially, it feels like the cost-saving bottle episode, so the rest of the specials could be as big as they were. But this is one of those episodes that truly shows what Doctor Who is capable of, where they can do incredible stuff with very little bombastic fanfare. Having the Doctor and Donna trapped on this giant, deserted ship, they're not sure where they are, why the TARDIS landed here, or why no one else is around. It's an incredibly slow burn, but the long, echoing questions and quiet contemplations add to the atmosphere of this one. Being stuck at the edge of nothing and trying to rationalize it. A struggle that becomes somewhat exaggerated and more dangerous when the monsters for this episode, the Not Things, make themselves known. Love that name, by the way. The Not Things are magnificent creatures because it still isolates the Doctor and Donna on this ship, stealing their likenesses, using their own knowledge and insecurities against them while distorting into these monstrous versions of them. It's an incredibly twisted concept utilized excellently throughout the episode. Even playing on past tragedies in the series like the Flux. That was probably my favorite part of the episode, by the way. I love that we're not only not ignoring those events, but dwelling on them. It's fantastic.
So yes, I keep running, of course I do. How am I supposed to look back on that? It wasn't your fault. I know!
It's an environment where what little surrounds our heroes is out to get them, and they can't even work things out, because trying to solve the mystery is actually making things worse. It's the kind of story where all the traditional conventions of the show are actively fighting our heroes, and I love it when Doctor Who does that. A lot of people compared it to Midnight, and yeah, it's a very appropriate comparison. I don't think it's as good as Midnight, but it is a very close second. Maybe I'll feel differently in a year or so, ask me later. Wild Blue Yonder is absolutely nuts, but it's brilliant in how insane it is. It's the kind of existential, high-concept absurdity that only the show can provide. I do think it's the least anniversary feeling of the anniversary specials, but while they're all good in their own way, this one was by far my favorite. Where the Star Beast felt a little too repetitive, and the giggle was great until the last 20 minutes, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, Wild Blue Yonder does an amazing job capturing what Doctor Who is capable of at its best. And what better way to celebrate the show going for 60 years than to show off what it can really do. Number 4. Schmicago. Oh, Schmigadoon, how I miss thee. The original 6-episode series seemed like a one-and-done story, so no matter how much people were campaigning for another season, including me, I also wasn't getting my hopes up for more. When season 2 was confirmed, I was so excited, but I was also nervous. Schmigadoon seemed like it was meant to be a simple yet lovely story with homages to classic musicals. Could they really capture that magic again? Yes, they can, and it was amazing. With Schmicago.
Welcome to Schmicago.
As many fans predicted, where Season 1 focused much more on satirizing musicals from the 50s and 60s, Season 2, Schmicago, is a full-on satire of the dark and depressing Fosse era, and I have never laughed harder at dark and depressing. Everything is turned up a level from the first season. The production design, the parody, the choreography, and especially the performances. The actors who didn't get much dedicated screen time last season are given the chance to really shine here, and this season also has some welcome new additions to the cast, with Patrick Page and Titus Burgess. I freaking love Titus in the show, by the way. Every line of his is pure gold.
And then Josh and Melissa realized they were still in Chicago. Wah wah!
And oh my gosh, the music this season. From bombastic ensemble numbers to show-stopping solos to even heartfelt ballads, this soundtrack stands strong alongside the first season. I hesitate to say it surpasses it, but I was listening to these songs for months after the episode aired, so they're at least equal. But alongside all the laughs and songs, there's a strong heart to this season as well. When I heard that everyone was going to be playing new characters, I was worried it would bother me that we weren't going to get to see most of the characters we fell in love with in season 1. However, not only are these new characters delightful in their own way, but it's a decision that plays well into the theme of this season. Sometimes you can't go home again. It might be tempting to live in a fantasy where things seem less challenging, but at the end of the day, you've got to work with the cards you're dealt. But that doesn't mean it has to be a bad hand. While I do think that some choices made in the last minute of the show undermine this a bit, it was still a great new obstacle for Josh and Melissa to tackle. One that I think everyone can relate to on some level and communicated excellently throughout the season. Schmigadoon has become one of my go-to comfort watches, and it made me so happy that there's even more of it to enjoy now. I saw so many people diving into the show and getting so excited for each new episode this season, and that only made it better. Everything about Schmicago elevated the greatness that was already there, and if they get that much desired third season, I can only imagine how much bigger and better it'll get. Number 3. Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. You know, I was gonna put in this whole build-up about the pressure this movie had to live up to the breathtaking experience that was Into the Spider-Verse, but there's no point in doing that, is there? You've all seen this movie and have spent the following months singing its praises at any given opportunity, I'm sure. So instead of trying to explain why this is on a list of my favorite entertainment of the year, because it's on everyone's list, I'm instead going to praise one particular aspect of the film that I think it gets so right. How it takes advantage of the multiverse premise. The multiverse as a story device is something that some people are getting sick of, and while I don't really get that, I guess it's a combination of oversaturation and feeling like it's not often used creatively. Across the Spider-Verse, though, has its cake and eats it too. It is packed with pretty much every Spider-Man imaginable, loaded with jokes and action-packed conflicts that would satisfy any longtime fan of the character. But Across the Spider-Verse also uses that legacy it's drawing from for fan service cameos to enhance the themes and narrative of the film. This is something I think Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness did pretty well, but Spider-Verse takes it to a whole new level. Without getting too specific on the details, even though, again, you've all seen this movie, it commentates on the natural tragedy associated with Spider-Man, challenges the role Miles Morales has in that legacy, and in a metatextual sense, proves that he is more than worthy of the powers he's been given, no matter what anyone in any universe says. It not only understands the potential of its premise, but pushes the possibilities of it to their absolute limit. What it's like to face several versions of people who are a lot like you when you're still not entirely confident in who you are. Combined with remarkable action set pieces, Gwen's powerful and devastating plotline, and some of the most astonishing animation you will ever see in your life. Seriously, if anyone watches this and still claims that animation isn't art, I really want to know what their definition of art is. The only thing keeping Spider-Verse from being higher on the list than it is that it's technically not finished. This is just part one of a two-part story, and I can't in good faith rank it any higher until we see how the story concludes. But even though this story isn't done yet, Across the Spider-Verse is more than deserving of all the praise it's received. It took Spider-Man and the multiverse, two of the most overdone things in entertainment today, and created something fresh and original with it. It was amazing. You all know this. Let's move on. Number 2. Neona. The fact that I can say this is a solid contender for Best Animated Film of the Year when Across the Spider-Verse is around should tell you just how good it is. I knew nothing about Neona going in. I heard it was a revived project, I'd seen some clips from the trailer, and I had intended to check it out, but wasn't in any rush to. But then some friends of mine saw it and insisted we watch it right away, so we did. And it was amazing. First off, what an incredible looking movie. It's got that great 2.5D style that makes it look like a graphic novel come to life, which makes sense because it was adapted from a graphic novel, and the world they inhabit is beautifully constructed. Every scene is amazing to look at. But what really worked about Neona to me is that it played on a lot of familiar tropes and story devices and bends them until they break. It's not afraid to delve into that uncomfortableness of the other, the ones who don't fit into the conventional norms of society, and most importantly, what that does to the outcast. Protagonists who don't fit in are very common in animation, obviously, it's basically the default, but usually it's because they're quirky or eccentric, and while Neona is all those things, and possibly the most chaotic character of 2023, she's also, to society at large, a monster, when there is nothing about her actions that should earn her that title. The directness of Nemona's tragedy is bold and strong. Nemona is a character who is okay and happy with the way that she is, but the thing that gets to her is that no one else is. So many people in real life have to fight for their right to just exist, when they are not doing anything to anyone by doing so. But they are demonized for not fitting into the mold the world decided they should. This movie doesn't pull any punches in depicting that, and that makes the ultimate acceptance she gains, even from just one person, feel so good. It's small, but it means the world. The relationship between Nemona and Ballister is, again, nothing new, but it's challenged much more than other relationships like it, and plays so beautifully into the themes of the film. We see through Ballister how tough it is to remove prejudices and fears baked into our own perceptions, but also that it's possible when you really get to know and love people who are seen as different. And that is a wonderful thing to put out into the world. If Across the Spiderverse was a full story and not just the first act to a bigger one, it probably would have ranked higher here, admittedly, but Neona is just so complete and strong in the story it tells that I can't help but put it just a bit higher in my own personal ranking. The animation is beautiful, the characters are all memorable, the presentation and subjects are incredibly impactful, with a moment near the end that I hope one day is praised as much as the iconic opening of Up. It's really funny, it's so good. I don't know if it's the best movie of the year, but it's easily my favorite. I'd make a whole video on it if I didn't know other people out there have done a much better job at it. Here's one of them by Council of Geeks, go check it out. Not to mention, it's so queer. Like, super queer. And yes, that is part of what makes it so great. Queer media had some real high points this year.
Can you just be you, please?
I don't follow.
Go, you.
But I'm not a girl. I'm a shark.
Before we get to my number one, though, let's go over some quick honorable mentions. National Treasure, Edge of History. Because of how this show aired, it just didn't fit on either year-end list. But I am a huge National Treasure fan, I was psyched about this show, and I loved it. I thought it was a great update on what makes National Treasure so fun, brought to the 2020s. It breaks my heart this will be its only season, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and wanted to give it some praise somewhere. Barbie. There's a reason this was the highest grossing movie of the year. Everything you've heard is true. Much like the Lego movie before it, Barbie shattered any dismissive expectations audiences might have had going in to deliver a story that examines what Barbie really means to the world around her and even herself. I do think that people hyping it up did lead to me not getting as into it as others did, but I can at least put it in the honorable mentions for garnering the praise in the first place and living up to it. Loki, Season 2. If you saw my review of Season 1, you might be surprised to see this here, but I'm happy to report that Season 2 not only has almost none of the things that bugged me in the first season, I think it's significantly stronger in every area, keeping the multiverse ending disaster much more centered on our God of Mischief to spectacular effect. Where I dreaded reviewing the first season, I cannot wait to properly talk about Season 2. Pokemon Concierge. Of course Pokemon had to drop a new series right before the year ended. If you're one of those fans who wants to see stories about Pokemon that don't involve battling, this is what you've been waiting for. It's so wholesome and calming and fun, and the stop motion animation is wonderful, and the Pokemon are all so fuzzy and adorable, and I loved it! It was so delightful. Mr. Monk's Last Case. As a longtime Monk fan, I was thrilled when this movie was announced. Now, I will warn that it's not a particularly fun watch. Trigger warning, the main character is contemplating suicide the entire time, but Monk had a special way of tackling delicate subjects, and this is no different. I think it's a good example of character regression, the ending is hopeful and optimistic, and I did get a warm feeling out of just seeing these characters solve a case again. It's not perfect, I did have my issues with it, but if it wasn't for Tetris, it would have made the list properly. But now, let's get to the big one. My number one favorite piece of entertainment from 2023 is... Reminder, this list is entirely subjective. Good Omens 2. Like I said before, queer media was top tier this year. I was way late boarding the Good Omens hype train. I didn't get around to watching the show until the summer of 2022. And yeah, I loved it. How can I not? It's great. But as great as the Good Omens series was, I feel like I'd missed the chance to be in on talking about how great it was. So imagine my surprise when I discovered that a second season of Good Omens would be coming in 2023. And of course, my first reaction was... how? Good Omens isn't based on a novel, it's just one book. So what else is there to do? What would this continuation even be about? Well, in layman's terms, shenanigans. Good Omens 2 technically has a plot, but it is pretty wafer thin. It is the exact opposite of the previous season. The focus cast is considerably smaller, and the story only affects the continuing conflict between heaven and hell, rather than the world at large. So what ranks it as number one above much more complex and elaborate stories? Well, It's mainly the best part of Good Omens, except now there's way more of it. Aziraphale and Crowley. This season is completely and entirely their story. How they solve problems together, what they got up to throughout history, or just going on dates. I mean, about their days. Neil Gaiman and the creative team clearly honed in on what people really wanted to see if there were more stories told with these two, and it is so much fun to watch. Michael Sheen and David Tennant's chemistry is still off the charts and makes those domestic antics and life or discorporation conflicts even more entertaining. If there was any doubt that Aziraphale and Crowley's friendship was or could be something more, that is completely out the window now. And as much as I will always prefer friendships over relationships, this rocked. It's so well done and I loved every second of it.
Well, perhaps you could tell me while we dance.
You don't dance.
Oh my God, you guys are so gay!
The fact that it is such a different story from the previous season is part of what makes it so exceptional. They weren't trying to make lightning strike twice here. They were just trying to have fun with what would happen next. And to me, that's what makes for the best sequels. What would more adventures with Aziraphale and Crowley look like? What would keep them close? What questions would they have to confront? And what could possibly come between them? I do appreciate the attempt to tell a larger story and continue the themes of questioning authority, fighting for individuality, and how simple joys leave more of an impact than world-changing actions. There are intriguing developments that will likely lead to another potentially world-ending event in a third season that, thanks someone, has been confirmed. Part of me feels hypocritical for placing Good Omens 2 as my number one because I took points away from other stories that were just part of a greater story, and that's exactly what this is. It's basically the intermission between two world-ending conflicts. However, the larger continuation really doesn't come into play until the last episode. Before then, it's just ineffable shenanigans. And I loved it. I do commend them for laying the groundwork to tell a more substantial story in the future, but it really wasn't necessary. This season could have just been a big old epilogue of these two faffing about and everyone would have gone home happy. Probably happier than they did, but that would be spoilers. My number one choice on these end of the year lists are usually reserved for the things that left the biggest impact on me that year. Whether I found it to be the most impressive, emotional, or just downright fun. And Good Omens 2 was kind of all those things for me this year, more than anything else I watched. It's not perfect, it more than has its fair share of faults, but I came back to it over and over again after finishing it the first time, and was my main fixation pretty much until Doctor Who came back. Boy, this was really Tennant's year, wasn't it? I cannot wait to see where this all eventually goes. That last episode is going to scar me for life in the best way possible, but in the meantime, everything that's got so right makes Good Omens 2 my favorite piece of entertainment of 2023. It's tough to say what the world of entertainment will be like going into 2024. We're already off to a great start, but out of what we know is on the way right now, there are things I'm excited about, things I'm cautiously optimistic about, things I feel like I've been waiting for most of my life, and things I'm actively dreading. But if I've learned anything from making these lists, is that there's always something to anticipate and appreciate with this visual medium of entertainment. Not only do I look forward to all the coming year has to offer, but what I'll be celebrating as my absolute favorites this time next year. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what some of your favorite entertainment this year was in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Chelsea Crandall, David L. Sproul, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.